Agile and Security, Oil and Water. My name is Ron Parker. I have a terrible southern accent. It's kind of drawl at a time. I just kind of go all over the place. So I apologize that up front and first. I actually work for a large insurance company, largest disability insurance company in the United States. I'm a security architect there, have worked with development, large system installation, security, stuff like that forever and ever. And recently have worked more and more with the push toward Agile. And when I say Agile, I'm not really here to talk today about whether that's big Agile or little Agile or all those other crazy things that you can talk about. We're going to talk about Agile and security. And if you'll notice, this is a blue room, blue deal here. Most of the people here today, you know, they're not blue. They're probably more of the red team. And you notice the red team when they're driving around, you know, in their hoodies and their cars and their paparazzi off to the side and all their news. You know, that's them. We're over here on the blue side trying to protect the homeland. And the red shirt people, we know what happens to them at the end of the day. You really do want to be blue team people. You really do, and that's what we're going to keep on working towards. And we're here today to really talk about the sad story of salad dressing. And you know, I know what you're saying. You're saying, "Hey, I've heard this before," but just bear with me. You probably want to hear this again. So when we talk about salad dressing, you know, usually I cook a lot. I like to cook. Because the end result of cooking is eating. Yes, that's good. It always comes up good. So I think the best kind of salad dressing out there is the homemade kind. So I go grab a bottle. I don't grab any bottle. I grab a nice bottle that's around because I want it to look decent. So I go get my bottle and I halfway fill up my bottle with, you know, some kind of good vinegar, and I go digging around and I put some other stuff in, and then I always put oil in with my vinegar. If you notice right away, you know, I can see the oil and I can see the vinegar, and that's kind of what happens naturally there. If you look, we've got no mixing. They separate on their own, and the oil floats to the top of the vinegar, and it's just kind of stays that way. But I know that it's salad dressing. So I pick the bottle up and I shake it, set the bottle back down, and immediately what happens? All of a sudden, all of my nice stuff and my oil and stuff starts to separate. All that oil goes to the top. So I say, hey, I can fix this. So I pick it up and I shake and shake again, set it back down, and it's kind of still that way. So by now, I have an oil slick on my shirt. I have sprayed salad dressing on everyone in the room. When I pour this stuff out, it tastes like, who knows what it tastes like. It's nasty in the bowl. Everything's just a mess. So when I look at this, I put all this effort in, yet no one's happy. I'm not happy because I've got salad dressing all over me. People aren't happy because their salad tastes like, oh, by the way, if you're not, I know if you're a big meat eater, paleo, whatever, pretend that you're going to put this on a steak or something, okay? Just so there's no salad involved. It's actually steak dressing, so just pretend that. So, you know, I put all this effort in, and I shake this stuff, and I put it down, and it just doesn't mix correctly. It just doesn't mix naturally. And that's our problem, because, you know, some things just don't mix well. When we look at them, they don't mix naturally. So when we begin to look a little bit closer, you know, these things don't go together on their own. So what does that have to do? So let's look a little bit. Let's look at Agile and Security then, talking about things that maybe might not mix. When most people think about development and security, is the first thing that comes to your mind, oh, that's one of the happiest, best things we have where I work is development and security. Everyone loves to do that together, right? I see everybody, yeah, happy times. No, truth be told, most people don't want to mix those two things. Most people just don't care. So let's talk a minute first. Let's back up and let's talk about what do we mean by Agile. And not going to go into every methodology, everything that's out there, but I do think there are some things that we need to talk about and look about Agile and what makes it different. And it really is more than, and I'm going to rattle off some stuff here. First of all, how many people are doing what they think is Agile where they're at now today? How many people want to do Agile or think they may be forced to do it at gunpoint at some time? Okay. So when we look at this, I'm not really going to talk specifically about Scrum or Kanban or Scrumban or Lean or any of those other Agile methodologies that are out there. I'm going to talk about Agile in a generic kind of way. And there are things that make Agile, Agile. When we look at teams, there's a lot of differences. They're accountable. They're more accountable than the old way. They're self-organizing. You know, the teams that come together to do their work, they kind of work on the problem on their own and they get the resolution on their own. They move at their own pace. You know, they get together, they look at that problem, they figure out how to solve that problem, and whether they go slow or whether they go fast, they're moving at their own pace. And they're using their own methods. So when we look at that, a lot of times you'll have Agile, I may have a business with 3 Agile teams and they still may be operating a little bit differently. Each Agile team may have come up with kind of a little bit of a different way to move forward. And so when we put all this together, we start seeing that these teams don't really want to work with anyone else because they're working at a certain speed. They don't really want to wait on anyone else. They're trying to do continuous improvement. They're trying to make themselves better. They don't have time for anyone else to come in. But the good part is, a couple of things that the Agile teams have in the Agile movement is a goal of, you know, customer first and quality and some of these other things, and that's a good deal. So when we look at the Agile model, a lot of times if you'll kind of look at the picture, you'll have a team, but that team will be coordinated somehow, and that team still has to work with non-Agile parts. So when I talk about Agile, this is kind of what I'm talking about. You know, something that looks like this. So that takes us on, and so what I'm not talking about then is waterfall, big design up front. Hey, let's figure everything out before we write a single line of code. That's not Agile. So as we look at security, it's like, oh man, you know, there's a lot to security, and basically we hear all the time about CIA. We hear about confidentiality and integrity. We hear about those things. Privacy is very important today. Privacy is on every company's mind. If you have customer data, you had better be worrying about privacy. If you are a regulated company, you need to be worried about compliance. And this is, we don't talk about this a lot, but it's there. You know, ask some of the companies out there, what does brand matter? You know, there have been companies, you know, we talk about Target and yeah, their stock was affected, they'll live, they'll make it. There are other companies though that were affected that are actually out of business. We don't talk about those enough. And you think about that, that's the ultimate brand. What's the ultimate thing to hurt your brand? I went out of business. You know, that's as bad as it gets. So we take those high-level thoughts that are in security, and we try to drive that through with our policies, our standards, you know, our directions and guidelines and so forth. And so when I look at security, it's a much bigger umbrella than what a lot of people see and know about. Because when we talk about security, especially here at BSides, a lot of what you see is, you know, pen testing, blue team, red team type stuff. The umbrella is bigger than that. You know, when we look, there's the whole identity management piece. How do we deal with identities? You know, that's horribly complex. Access management. Once I have an identity, what does it connect to? You know, there's a whole discipline to that. Vulnerability management. You know, we've talked about that some here today, about finding them, patching them, how do we deal with it. The stuff that we do know about, like secure coding, secure testing, you know, that makes sense. But there are more complications. Cloud and mobile are really changing the landscape we have today. So after you read all this, you're just tired. You know, you look at all this and you go, man, I'm tired. You know, so what do we have to do? You know, when I'm looking at this, how do I do this? How many? And you don't have to answer this because this may be super secret. You know, do you know your ratios of security people to developers? You know, consultants to developers. Do you know that ratio? Is it high, low? Do you have 1 per 1, 1 per 100, 1 per 500? You know, what is that ratio? Because my guess is, whatever it is, you don't have enough people. You don't have enough people to scale security to where it needs to be. My guess is the developers are many more, and they're outrunning you no matter what you do. That's just a guess. You know, what is your coverage? Do you know if you're covered? And that brings us really to the problem here. What's our assurance of security across the company? How do I believe? What do I believe? What do I know about security really happening across the company? You know, the business needs to know, and the business wants to know, are we doing things securely? And can you, as security people, answer that in any way? I know the pen testers, red team, blue team, they can run out and say we've had 12.2 million attacks against our whatever DMZ firewall thingy, and we stopped every one of them. You know, but what can we do as developers to go to develop the security developer areas? What can we do to go to the business and say, here's how secure we are. Here's our level of assurance. So when we look at this, what we really need is we need that mix of agile approach. We need that mix for security to be there. We don't need to just do security or just do development or just do agile. We need a mix of these things. Security needs to mix with this agile approach. We can't sit on the sidelines and casually watch this, kind of go by. So let's talk about mixing security and agile. So here what we have is a big blue circle for security, and we've got this red squiggly looking circle down the bottom for agile. So one of the things that we'll want to do is we will apply effort to both sides. We will go to the security people and say, I want you to act this way. We'll go to the developer people and we'll say, we want you to do this. Then we'll break things up into little parts, and we'll start, beating people to tell them what to do. And security people, can work on this to make it, but it takes a lot of work. So what we do is we put in an incredible amount of meetings. We call meetings for security people to come and do stuff. We set up meetings to do this. We pull these people in, those people in. We make them watch videos and answer questions, or whatever we do that's torturous, we do it. And so what happens is we put all this effort in, takes a lot of work. I stop and turn my back or go on vacation, and pretty much immediately, this is what happens the minute I don't look. So what do we do when we're right back to here? What do we do when we're right back to where, we started? That's really the situation, but seriously though, it takes effort to get anywhere. And we know to this point that they haven't been mixing. They really haven't. And what does that mean? What that means is there's a lot of bad stuff that actually happens here when this goes on. We have too many meetings, that are security driven. We have development teams that, how many people in here have made a development team wait? No one? That's amazing. You might have. I know you have. If you, Oh, okay, if you're how many of you are developers who are waiting on the security team? Okay. That's no good. You can't, we don't want that. Nobody likes that. Insecure code gets out. We don't do the correct testing. We're not looking at, data issues, privacy issues. Nobody's even doing that old OWASP top 10 thing. And we ask the same questions over and over again, And it really does come down to it's just not a natural mix. So what do we see as a root? What do we start seeing as the root cause of this thing? There's a knowledge issue. My knowledge as a security person is different than your knowledge as a developing person. We have totally different types of knowledge. And it's not at hand. It's not easy. My knowledge isn't at hand for you. It's not easy to get to. My knowledge is just not there for you. We're running at different speeds. I'm writing a book every time you ask a question. You're trying to write code. Those are two totally different speeds. You're running, and I'm kind of like slowing you down. There's also, we have different time frames. You're trying to produce something. I'm trying to protect something. Totally different. And then there's different people. Is your boss my boss? No, we have different hierarchies, different structures, different goals. So there is no way that, I can go to you and say, hey, you really need to do this. What's in place for you to care? Why do you have to care? And also there's the big problem of the number of people. There's probably a lot fewer security people than there are development people. So we look at this, and a lot of it amounts to people just don't know. They just don't know, both sides. So what's the real reason that we want this to mix? Everybody's got goals, but it really does come down to we need to be doing more than just development and more than just security. We need secure development. We really do. And not just lip service either. We need something very special. We need something we haven't really had up to this point. We need a rainbow unicorn butterfly kitten. We need something that special to pull all this together. So, seriously, we do. So when we look to try to get these goals to where they make sense, I think we can look at three things. There are three things that you're going to hear me talk about the rest of the time. That is, I want to make security an enabler. I want to enable people with knowledge and process. I know in Agile, process is bad, but at the same time, I need to give you enough process to where you can go on. I need to scale security with enabled people. I can't take a bunch of ignorant people, right, and scale it out. I make them knowledgeable people who have process, and that can scale out security. Then what does that do? That raises my level of assurance of how good security is. I get that assurance from having those enabled people scaled out. So if I go enable one developer, that probably isn't, if I've got one developer enabled and he's ready to go, but I've got 1,000 more who aren't, I haven't scaled properly. I haven't really done a whole lot. There's still, that's still kind of a mess. That's not giving me the assurance, that I really need. So what we need to do is we need to address the dressing. So now let's go back and let's talk about the dressing. What were we trying to accomplish? We were trying to accomplish the mixing of those things because we wanted a good mix that when applied would come out in the end and everything would be together. That's what I was trying to do with that addressing. And I was also trying not to work myself to death. I could take that salad dressing, shake it up like crazy, pour and shake and pour and shake and make a mess, and it may work. But I'm lazy. I don't want to do that. So in looking at that dressing, and there he is, he's still sitting there, just like he was when we left him. What can I do to make this take a lot less effort? What can bring all this together? So what we're looking at here, we need to add something to the mix. We need to add a third party to this mix. The third party here is you got to brace yourself. Everybody sit up straight. This is science, so I know it could be rough. We need to actually add, we're going to add this honey, we put it in there, we shake, science happens, and now all of a sudden my dressing is mixed. And it'll stay that way. I can set it on the shelf and it'll stay that way. All of a sudden, I made a little change that made a big change in the end. So what in the world did I add? What did I do? I actually added an emulsifier. That's what I actually did. Does anybody know what an emulsifier is? Sure you do. You're all smart people. So an emulsifier, I'll talk to myself. An emulsifier is something that brings two other things together. The emulsifier it's the piece that likes both oil and water. So when I add an emulsifier, it brings those two things together. So when I added it to the mix, it actually caused it to stay mixed. So for salad dressing, there are lots of, if you didn't know this, there are lots of emulsifiers. Honey's an emulsifier. You'll see mustard in salad dressings because it's an emulsifier. You'll see egg yolks because it's an emulsifier. That's why you put it in there, because everything will stay good and mixed. So let's go back and let's start again with our circles. And now let's look at what we need to do. Let's add an emulsifier. So I come through this mix. I put a little bit of effort in, shake around. I have this science happening in the middle. And then all of a sudden I come out in the end with distributed pieces. I have blue connected to red and it stays that way. I have reasons for this thing to happen. It's distributed the way it needs to be. That's the science. But what? What in the world, what can we do to bring security and Agile together? We've been talking about salad dressing. What can I do for security and Agile to actually bring things together? What is our emulsifier? What do we need from a security and development side? Simple answer, it's going to be a security development lifecycle. That's our simple answer. It is our security emulsifier. That is the thing that we actually need. And I'm not talking about government-spawned SDL, nastiness. I'm really going to go through this and well, I know what you're saying. You're saying, wait, I've heard this before. We've been listening to you for 30 minutes and I've heard this before. I feel cheated. Well, this is not a rehash. This is actually different. It's different because of the way that we're going to apply it. So as we look forward, this is not a rehash. So when we look at SDL, we look at how does it solve those three things. It enables people to work for themselves. It scales because it's knowledge driven. It adds that level of assurance because the assurance is we check at the correct times. We know what's important. We have a framework out there that makes things happen. It really does enable and empower people. And we're going to go through the two things. We're going to go through and kind of show you what this is, but we're also going to show you how to implement this correctly. And I think that that's the important piece, because so many times what we've seen with SDLs is people kind of throw it out there on the table and expect it to grow like weeds, and it just never does. So normal implementations, when I look at a normal implementation, I see big SDL models. I see Agile teams trying to work with security people. They put in a request. The security people, they never write. This is a secret. Security people never write anything down. It's all tribal knowledge. It's in their head. So when you ask them a question, they make up the answer right about the time you ask them, but they won't answer right away. They won't answer you right away. No. They'll say, well, we have a so-and-so document standard policy thing in the repository on that. I'll get back to you. They hang up. They call their buddies. They all talk about it, and they do a secret vote and a handshake. And then they wait a week to get back with you. That's what happens right now. That's what happens in... Well, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. So the problem with the old way is this is called, and this is important, this is called a push model, not a pull model. you're having, as a developer, we are pushing work on you. We're telling you when we're going to meet. We're telling you when this is going to be ready. You are not able to, move as you want to move because this stuff is actually not flowing too well. And that's the problem with the traditional SDL, is it is based on that push model. Chances are it has tribal knowledge, all those nasty things in there. What we need to do is we need to look at an Agile implementation where we change that around. We want to turn this into a pull model. And the pull model means when you're ready, you go get the work that you need to do. You put that work in your queue, on your board, in your backlog, or whatever other magical thing that you have. You drive it, not the security person. Now this takes work, but this is what you have to do. Because your Agile people need to do the work when they need to do the work. So the pull model sets it up to where I can have one or more Agile teams running at whatever speed they need to run. And if you notice down the bottom right-hand corner, the security person, he needs to do a lot of work, but his work is to feed the SDL, is to set up the repository correctly, is to set up that checklist correctly to where it will enable the other people doing the work. So when we look at this, the big difference as you go back, and because I know after this, you're going to immediately run to your car, download this presentation, and read it again. So when you're in your car looking at this again here shortly, before you go to the after party, when you're looking at this, it's the pull and the push thing that needs to stick in your head. You've got to figure out, how do I make security a pull and not a push? So one of the things in looking at it then is get away from going to that security person every time. Enabling the developers, giving them what I need. So SDL is our security emulsifier. So how do we get one? How do we get the right one? How do we do the right thing? That's really like the halftime question. I've got the answer now. How do I really do that? And since it's halftime, let's talk about checklist. We already heard a time or two today. You've heard a couple of people talk about the importance of checklists. Checklists are crazily important. If you've had surgery lately, you had people reading a checklist when you had surgery. If you, like we heard this morning, if you take off in a plane, people are reading a checklist. And they're doing it because in complex or high pressure situations, you don't want mistakes. Development can be complex. Security can be complex. So it's just another reason that doctors, astronauts, pilots, scrum masters, all can use a checklist. So when we look at this, that checklist truly is a reminder. It is a reminder for what you should do. And it's kind of interesting. This particular page is actually out of one of the Apollo checklists when they went to the moon. And they basically said, it was the 4th crew member on the ship. The checklist actually was. And they actually basically read their way to the moon because they were following their checklist. And something else the checklist tells you about that's important is, what if something goes wrong? It gives you alternate paths. It gives you things to do right away. So that's the same thing that we can do in development. We can set up alternate paths. We can give people options. So where do we get our checklist? We get our checklist, there is one good source right away. We can jump out and go to OpenSAM. Is anybody familiar with OpenSAM? That's great. OpenSAM is from OWASP. They actually sat down and said, hey, if I'm going to build a security organization or an SDL or whatever, what do I need to do? So they built this model that basically has 4 major functions: governance, construction, verification. They went under each one of those then and said, if I was a good security shop, here's what I would do. And so then you see these security practices, like you need to do code review, you need to do security testing, you need to do threat assessment. So it actually goes through and tells you these are good things to do. And it also, if you don't have a security program in place, it helps you put a security program in place. So when we begin to look at it with these 4 functions, you'll notice governance, construction, verification, deployment. Those are really types of work. Now this is an important distinction. Those are types of work, not the order that you would necessarily do the work. Does that make sense? Because these are great, but not necessarily the way you want to go about it. So what we have to do then is we take each one of these functions, we look at that practice. For example, this is security requirements, and everybody, that's a real popular one. Hey, we actually need to have security requirements. And so we look at that and you figure out how do we do that? So they come up with a maturity model, and they have 3. They're not CMMI compliant or anything. They basically have 3 levels of maturity, 1, 2, 3. And if you look at that security requirement 1, it says 2 very basic things you need to do. You need to have security requirements from business functionality. In other words, the business needs to operate. How do I get those business requirements? Then I need to look outside of the business and say, what compliance requirements do I have? I would also add in there what privacy, that's a big one. You're going to hear me say this a couple more times. This is not complete. This is a list to show you a structure and a list to show you how to get started, but it is not complete. You will have to sit down with your business and work it out and fill out that list. So we look at this. There's also different levels. As you go up in levels, they get a little bit more rigorous. Like the 3rd level, they want you to actually audit. So that's way on down the list. And once again, there's a little bit more detail about the actual activity. And this, I would say, this is completely out of their PDF, their online spot. You would definitely want to change that. So what we have to do to make this work is, if you look, these are some random methodologies. And each one of these methodologies have wheels and phases and, sub-variant something and others. They've all got all these pieces and parts. That's too many, because what we don't want to do with security, and this is huge, we can't go inject ourselves. We can't go to each one of these methodologies and basically tailor it to that methodology. I don't have enough time. You don't have enough time to do that. So what we need to do is make our own checklist and let everyone use that. I can't go to each one of these because you know why? Developers, I know there's not any in here. Developers and project managers are going to change their mind every day and do something different every day, and they're going to pick a different methodology depending on which way the wind blows. We don't want to do that. We need to build something a little bit more stable. So what do? We come up with phases. We actually have 4 generic phases that we put all this stuff into. Let's call it inception. Let's do these things at the beginning of a project. Let's do these other things in iteration 1 or more times as you go through your work. If you're doing waterfall, you'd do it once. If you're doing Agile, you're going to do it every time you do whatever. Release is when you actually produce something. External is a complicated one. A lot of times with Agile, you're running in what? Are you running in sprints? What are you running in? Sprints? Everybody doing sprints? You've got some 2-week sprint maybe? 2-week? You got a 2-week sprint. There are other activities that fall outside that 2-week sprint that may be bigger than your 2-week sprint. And so those activities are external activities that can't fall within normal development time. Maybe you've got to do a vendor evaluation or something that takes a really long time. So you have to kind of watch that. But those are 4 generic phases that kind of tell you what and when. So then we take all these activities that I start with. I go to the SAM and I pick these activities out. I put those activities in each one of our generic phases. So now I can say, with iteration, you need to do non-functional security requirements. You need to do an attacker profile. You need to do security stories. I can put all that in the correct spot. And even down, like I say, in the external, whatever I need to do there, and that's going to kind of vary for company to company also. This is not a complete list, by the way. I just typed some stuff on there. The list should be much larger than that, and not The other thing is not all activities apply to every project. There's no sense in me to worry about a cloud activity if I'm not doing cloud stuff or mobile stuff or whatever it is. Where the SAM falls down and the Microsoft SDL falls down and many of the other SDL, SDLCs just totally fail is right here. It's in the atypical SDL activities. And those are things where it's not just about coding and testing. Security takes more to get done. Real security is bigger than that. So we have to worry about role engineering. How many of you ever have to deal with role engineering or identity and access management? I just ask you that because I need a drink. I don't really care. No, I'm kidding. With that, you look at role engineering, that's a huge part, and it needs to be done on every project. But a lot of times those SDLs, they don't mention it. They don't have it in there. So this gives us a way to do that and say, hey, you need to put your access request in because those security people are so slow, it's going to take you 6 months to get it back. But you need to do it now. You know, we go all through that. Disaster recovery. Did you do your disaster recovery setup? Did you do your scripting, your documentation, or whatever else it took? So we can add all that in there. The most interesting one on this page is actually toward the bottom. It's the security retrospective. The very last thing you do in your project for security is you sit down and you talk about what went good, what went bad, wrong, and so forth with security on a particular project. And then you give feedback amongst your team and feedback back to security. Those are great things to happen. So what you're asking me now is, oh God, look at all the, you've now buried me in a bunch of stuff. What can I do to pull all this together? Who can I get to actually do something with this that was going to make everybody do this and keep them all together? You need a Ranger Rick, right? You need a Ranger Rick who will come in, or self-organize and keep you all going. Well, you probably don't need the post-apocalyptic Ranger Rick. You probably need somewhere like a park ranger or a guide or something like that. What you actually need is a security owner. Just like in Scrum, roles in Scrum. We familiar with roles in Scrum? That kind of thing? If we have a security owner, we could actually assign someone the role, not the job, the role of being the security owner for a team. And that way, that one person, I could train that one person to use the SDL. I could train them to know about the security concerns and so forth. And they could be basically the keeper of my checklist. So I could train this security owner to be that primary contact, because I don't know if you've all had to work with ITIL and stuff like that, but a big thing with ITIL is you want one hand to shake, one throat to choke. You know, that's what you want with ITIL. You don't really want 17 people being responsible. You know, you want one to be accountable for that. They're accountable for the activities. So that gives us a person to do this, but we're missing another piece. We really need a place to put this. And I've looked and looked and looked and tried to figure this out, and this is the cheap budget, no frills way. A wiki. It does really have what you need to set this up. You need flexible, smart pages. You need a knowledge base. You need easy access and update. You need something that's searchable that you can work with. Well, a wiki can actually give you all that. Matter of fact, a wiki, you know, it really is that to, you know, to the extreme, because it gives you the easy formatting. It gives you categories. It's kind of the whole crowdsourcing, crowd-driven thing. And we'll take a look at that here in just a second. So SharePoint, are we SharePoint people? SharePoint can do this too, even though most of the time I don't recommend it, but anyway. So the real implementation, even though we spent about 12 minutes on this, the real implementation list looks something like this. And I'm not about to read that. The only important thing on there is there's lots of stakeholder involvement. You need to have the developer people talking, the security people talking, the business people talking. All these people need to understand what you're trying to do with this when you're pulling it together. And that's really, you know, there's more to it than even this, but this really kind of shows you what it looks like. So now the big deal. is let's look at something. Let's take a gander. So this is a wiki. Used PM Wiki. I don't know if y'all are wiki friendly. PM Wiki. I just picked a wiki. PM Wiki's pretty easy. Doesn't use a database. It's easy to install. Took and put together a real basic site that allows me to basically explain these phases, show you what I was going on, then take each one of those and break them down and show you the activities. Now what's really nice about this, if I'm doing iteration and I'm looking at iteration and I go down to look at security requirements, I can actually click on iteration, click on activities, click on the security requirements, and look at a page that describes how I should do that. This is copied straight out of the OpenSAM. I haven't changed or updated that any at all. But you at your company, you should write more detail in there. You should have, more help. This basically just says, hey, do what's in the SAM. The nice thing about this is, as I go through this, if I need a list of all activities, my security owner can go in and get a list of everything that I might need to do security-wise for a project. So what that means, if you're a PM, PL, Scrum Master, whatever you are, you should be able to glance at this and not be surprised, because that's what happens so often is we surprise people in security. We get to the very end to go, hey, we're going to run this test. It's going to take 6 months. You should have scheduled all that. I need 58 million user stories that talk about that. That shouldn't happen. This list should prevent that to some degree, and your Scrum Master or PL or whoever can actually use this to see what's going on. The other important one with this is you can add your own stuff. The retrospective is not in the SAM. I just added that to show you. And if you have other processes or other steps that need to be taken, you add it in here. You put it in the appropriate place. The good thing is, if I've got a group that's doing waterfall still, I've got a group that's doing Scrum, you train and point them to this, and you don't worry about whether they're doing Scrum or waterfall. You take that out of the picture altogether. You don't care anymore. You just want this checklist to be done, and that's all you want. So the good thing about the wiki is I'm able to take all of these activities and tag and put them together to where, you see the tags down at the bottom, to where I can show you all of the activity phases, all of the iterations and so forth. I can show you all those things flat out. I can build a knowledge base to where I can start adding pages. For example, if I want to put my standards in here, I could put coding standards in the same wiki. So I could start telling people, here's the way you deal with passwords in a database. Here's the way you deal with this. Here's the way you deal with that. And I could start adding, I could go in here and add pages to actually do that, to support what I need to do. And because I can edit it, I could let my developers even edit it. So when they ran into issues, they could update it themselves as they found things. And that's the big Agile support, because I could actually take, and that continuous improvement piece, I could give it back to the developers, if that makes sense. So that gives us a list, that gives us a way to actually move around, and like a security owner, you can go look and see what you need to do. The nice thing about that wiki is, if you normally put things in documents, you start up Word, you go to Word, you type, you format it for 3 days, you don't get it right, it has to fit some corporate standards, you save it somewhere, you point someone at it, then when they need to see it, they have to go open it, With this, it's all right here. When I'm looking at this is the document I need to see, and if I need to print it, and I go to look at print, it goes into a pretty print mode. It's no frills, here it is, go do it, kind of deal. So much better, so much lower overhead than what we've seen in a lot of other places. Also, with the maintenance, if I was to look at this, see if I can remember this, because I don't know if, okay, I've got it in there already. When I edit pages, it's that easy. I can go straight to the page, I can make changes, I can type. do a save, and I'm done with that particular page. You actually, with these, I've got a history, and I can roll it back or do whatever I need to do. Most wikis have that, to where you can, there's varying levels of that. This one I've got practically everything cut off because I just don't care, you know. But others you can get all that information. There are, you know, the search is there, so if I can't find it, I can, you know, hey, there it is under guidelines, you know, and so forth. You know, full search, all that's there. So I think it's something that's, you know, simple. It's a simple way to give the developers a way to pull this information out, because it's not, there's not a magic pill. You know, we've had discussions in the last couple of days about this kind of stuff. There's not an easy way to do this. It requires people knowing that they have to do something. It requires accountability. It requires the security people. We have a huge accountability and responsibility of giving people information, enabling people. If we sit back with our tribal knowledge and don't do something like this, we have no hope. You know, the developers won't get any better, and our assurance won't get any better. Now, about the last thing on this, and I think this is kind of important, I actually started a domain. I started a domain, kicked up a domain called OpenSDL. So if you go to OpenSDL.com, there's actually this out there. And what I would like to do is, if anyone's interested in helping me build out a fully open, common SDL out there that actually makes sense, drop me a note, and I would love to work with you. This, like I say, I've got a domain out there, I've got a wiki set up out there. I would love to take it from this spot and really help people, you know, have a starting spot. Then we could take that wiki, slide it up into GitHub to where other people could go grab it, take it, modify it, do whatever they wanted to. So that way, if it'd be like instant SDL, you download it, you'd be ready to go with what you're seeing right here. It'd just be a flat out copy. So if you're interested in that, do contact me. Matter of fact, yeah, y'all all know that. It's great SDL. Contact me, SC Monk, easiest way to get hold of me on Twitter. That's the shortest way to type. But like I say, OpenSDL is out there, and like I say, it would be kind of cool to look at. So I do think the way that we enable, the way we scale, is to actually give people the tools and give people the knowledge and let them do it. Let them do it at their pace. Because we can't dictate. We know that doesn't work. So questions?
From the product owner role, would you on some level end up putting security into even the individual stories that you're writing for a given? Like,
there are.
To the point where you're doing continuous delivery on, you know, apps and.
There's a couple things you can do, right? There is, I have major gaps. I don't even have the security architecture to work in this project. So you may need to do an actual sprint, an architecture type sprint to fix the security problem. That's one. The second thing you would do would be, you can look it up. There's like security poker, security stories. There's all kind of stuff you can do with security to where you can take and say, I have specific backlog items that say that I have this particular security deal. Or you can get all detailed, and in each one of your stories, you know, expand it out a little bit and say, you know, depending on your story, because I don't know. I don't know if you're going to say as a whatever, or if you're just going to try to write it into the story. Yeah.
Yeah. What we've started doing is when we were writing use cases, we also write the corresponding use cases.
Yes, exactly.
So we do TDD. We write tests that attack the system, make sure it rejects invalid inputs, all that kind of stuff, just as part of it's the standard requirements. So that all depends on the team having a security owner. Someone who will insist that those are part of the requirements and will enforce that. But
the goal of your method is to get those requirements to the developers early on in the process.
It's just work. It's just work.
Instead of at the end. So at the end, you like you said, you come in, hey. We're 4 weeks out from delivering. We're about about to shoot you.
Right.
That was security.
Right.
Is your, who is testing when you do those? Is it your QA process part of that, or?
We're a very small team, so developers just do everything.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a person on the team who will.
You want evidence of test. You know, the big thing is to have evidence of testing. Yeah.
Criteria,
Yeah, someone on the team is saying, I'm adding a specific technical requirement, which is that this vulnerability must be shut. This one.
Your non-functional, if you'll look back in one of these iterations, there's actually a non-functional requirements section that you'll see in here. And in that non-functional requirement, you should actually go in, and it should be a requirement just like anything else. The problem is when those are broad. You know, if I make a broad non-functional requirement that touches 112 use case or user stories, it gets a little bit more complicated at that point. So that's why you still need a security owner to think to apply that. You know, so that's why your security owner is still important.
From experience, educating the developers consistently across the team also helps with that, because they each then mentally are thinking, okay, is he going to get upset with me if I don't pass this test and this test and this? And they'll just go ahead and do the work.
Yeah. Well,
so maybe project manager, like for example, like every new feature that comes up, you have generic information sitting out there on the wiki. Would it be the PM's job to start putting those non-functional security requirements in there, or would that be the developer's job?
well, I think there's you got two. I think it depends on the team. It depends on how the team is going. Who puts the normal requirements out there anyway? If your team does that, well, then you've got to have a team. You know, it needs to be a group effort. If everything comes in through the product owner or the whoever, they need to do it. You know what I'm saying? It really depends on the way how do you get requirements in there anyway? Because really these are, security requirements are business requirements. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it really is. It's just another piece of, I think we had a question back there I've been trying to point.
In your method, your security owner, are you looking at one per team?
Looking at one per team, because it's not a full-time, I mean, it's not as bad as it sounds, because what they'll do up front is they're going to know what kind of project they're on, so they'll need to go pull that list. And then really it is building that backlog or whatever of all those items. So most of those items will go in there as one-time shot deals. It's more complicated when we were talking about if I'm on lots of iterations, how do I I've got to have somebody review every iteration. Are there security things I need to pull back in? And that's all they'll really need to do, and maybe you get the rest of the team to do the work, if that makes sense.
So he could cover multiple teams.
Well, no, I don't know how you're working. We don't cross teams on our agile stuff anyway. We keep the teams are pretty much set. Yeah. That's why I'm saying this is a role, not a job. You know, this isn't, we're not, you know.
Your developers who just happens to.
It could be if you've got a scrum master, your scrum master may take it, you know.
On our team, there are two of us who have an interest in InfoSec, and then the rest of the developers are trying to do their job. And when we go to deploy stuff, we sort of run down our list and say, oh wait, we can't deploy this yet because we have to add these requirements or meet these qualifications.
We have an ARM group. A group called ARM. It's Advocates of Risk Management. It's kind of like Boy Scout, Girl Scout, Rangers, whatever. We have that group in our company, and what we do is we kind of train people randomly across all the development environment so they know more about security. So if there's an ARM member on one of the Agile teams, we'll tag that person to be the security owner because they know more just through their training about security.
So you're still coming back around as an overall governance group, and
you're still going to have all your there are certain things that you must do because of audit, because of compliance, because of whatever. There still has to be an amount of governance there. Absolutely. Can't get away from that. Any other questions? Y'all are like, I'm kind of disappointed in this side of the room. Questions?
Well, they're actually covering a whole lot. Because see, what I do is mostly information assurance, more on the government side. I mean, I'm contractor based, dealing with a lot of developers. I'm the only one in that security realm. And they just go, we develop, you deal with the security piece. So I'm listening to y'all going, what? That's great. Are y'all hiring? Because it's not, I don't get that. I'm the one having to do all the security, and they just go, here, we've done our part, go do it. So this is good. The way y'all do that is good.
I will say from experience, most developers, if you just explain to them
Yeah.
the common
Yes.
problems, like here, don't make this classic mistake with
Right.
SQL injection or whatever, they'll learn and do it the right way
And
because
they're-
they know better now.
Right, and they're okay with doing that part of it. It's just that other piece of the whole, I don't know, it's almost like there's a miscommunication that we're still growing and learning how to communicate and talk the same language kind of thing. So I'm getting there. It's just,
But we did retrospectives, not at the end of our project, just, but when you add security to your retrospective on a sprint, so that you're talking
Oh, you
about
can do that, yeah.
You've been able to address
Right.
this,
Right.
are you addressing security, and make it part of, maybe if it's a real issue, make it part of your stand-up.
You do want to do an overall, because what we will find overall is there are things that you may need to change about the entire processes you may not know until the end, and sometimes you don't end, so you have to really do it there. But I wouldn't neglect an overall retrospective to truly look back and say what was our real, because then you can look at each sprint and you could do that as you went, but I don't know that it gives you the same impact. I don't know that anything's wrong. I can't see the time for the glare, so we may be out of time. One more question. 4 minutes. Oh, okay. Not a question. Got 4 minutes. Any other questions? Do send me a note if you want to talk more about the OpenSDL. Like I say, that's something I would kind of like to look at and grow. Like I say, if you have any questions, want to talk about Agile, security, whatever, just drop a note. I'm always babbling, about something. And hopefully I'll go to this site and I'll make the presentation available out there too.
Is that on the BSides website?
Don't know. I don't know how we're doing this quite yet on the availability. I have to see. Okay. Thank you very much.